Hey everybody, welcome to February. This is episode 42 of Stand Up with Pete Dominic. I decided to spend 12 hours calling 15 people to talk impeachment and then drop those conversations into one big audio extravaganza bonanza of impeachment analysis and reaction. Welcome to the classroom of impeachment. That is today's episode of Stand Up. If I have any value at all, it's that I have the phone numbers of lots of smart people who like to answer my questions on a Sunday. I cashed in, and I hope you will consider a $5 or $10 or $1 million Patreon subscription at patreon.com/Pete Dominic so I can keep doing shows like this, and we can all fight apathy and ignorance and do our best to understand how to navigate these crazy times that we are in. Also, quickly, I'll be headlining Levity Live Comedy Club this Thursday in Nyack, New York, levitylive.com for tickets. Joining me today, comedian and actor, writer Andy Kindler, who was also on a Super Bowl commercial on Sunday. Comedian and SiriusXM host John Fugelsang, Reason Magazine's Matt Welch, MSNBC anchor and always awesome Ali Velshi, CNN and BFF Mark Preston, No F's to give Danielle Moody Mills of Woke AF Radio Show, always excitable Ellie Mistal of The Nation Magazine, Georgia State Constitutional Law Professor, The Legal Eagle Eric Siegel, Boston Globe columnist and author Michael Cohen. No, not that Michael Cohen. Lawyer and MSNBC legal analyst, the always awesome Katie Fang, Democratic strategist and writer of the great Big Stuff email, Adam Parcomento, executive director of Tax March, my friend, the hilarious and brilliant writer, Maura Quint, comedian and best Trump impersonator in the country, J.L. Covan. Let's get it started with the legend, SiriusXM host, my mentor, civil rights hero, Michelangelo Signorelli. Now I've got my old friend and mentor, Michelangelo Signorelli. You can hear him every day, 3 hours a day, on SiriusXM Progress. That's channel 127, 3 to 6 Eastern. He tweets at @msignorelli. Mike, thank you very much for joining me for my impeachment bonanza extravaganza. I have just a few quick questions. Are you surprised at all, first of all, in terms of the way this turned out?
Well, and I want to thank you, first of all, for having me on, and great to chat with you, even though it's about this horrendous situation. I'm not surprised, in the end, by the way Republicans just did whatever they could to protect Donald Trump. It was pretty astounding, though, to see the John Bolton revelations come out, the manuscript being leaked to the New York Times, and they still did whatever they could. And I think it just underscored that they knew it was only going to get worse for them, and they're going to take a hit no matter what, and they're better off taking a hit and not having seen anything than having to defend something worse.
Are there any really big questions that remain in your mind about who knew what when? And do you think we are going to learn the answers now that this trial is over in the next 274 days before the election?
I think we're probably going to see information coming out every day, every week. It's just clear that there's so much out there, so much evidence. We just learned about new emails that the administration had regarding Ukraine. There are lots of different groups working with Freedom of Information Act requests, getting information. Bolton has more in his book. John Kelly is suddenly talking a bit, the former chief of staff. Who else may talk? We don't know. I think that we're going to see a lot more come out. And I think that's what Republicans were worried about. They've tied themselves to Donald Trump, and they long past the time where they could cut the cord, and they've just got to defend him all the way in. So I think we're going to see a lot more. I think it's going to hurt them big time.
You, of course, are a staunch progressive, but you've never been shy to be critical of other progressives and Democrats in specific. Do you have criticisms of the way that the House handled impeachment when they brought it up, the charges, much less what took place in the Senate, even though Democrats didn't have control of the process once it reached there? Any criticisms of Democrats and the way they handled this?
I think that the way Nancy Pelosi handled the entire impeachment and the hearings and then holding the articles, all of that was very smart. And I think she did an excellent job. I was critical early on of why she hadn't moved earlier with impeachment. And, who knows how things would have played out. I think she was waiting for that great thing to grab onto. And I think holding the articles was really smart because it allowed for so much more to come out. A couple of criticisms I have. I would like to have seen more articles. I think it would have been much more for them to have to defend, much more for the American people to see. I think the trial would have been a little bit longer. I mean, there was so much other stuff relating back to the Mueller report, relating to emoluments clauses. And, I would have held the articles even longer. I don't think it was or is to the Democrats' advantage to let this end quickly and give them more pain. But otherwise, I think they did a great job.
A lot of what I'm seeing in terms of reaction, the conventional wisdom is that the president, now Trump, gains tremendous power and he can do almost anything now between now and next January if he somehow gets if he loses in November. But the other side of that is while he gains power temporarily, he loses a lot of credibility and so do Republicans in the Senate because they did not allow 4 witnesses, and it does look rigged. But my feeling is a little different in that we get our messages from wherever we get our messages. So Trump will say, I'm vindicated. Democrats will say the system's rigged. How do you see the implications for the election and for the time between now and then?
Well, we said all along that he had to be impeached and that even if he wasn't going to be removed from office, he had to be impeached, that it was important for Democrats to show they were looking for justice and that there needed to be a check on him. I still believe that to be true in the sense that yes, he will believe he's more powerful than ever. At the same time, had he not been impeached, he would be thinking he was super powerful. I mean, at least something happened. There are people holding him in check. There's an electorate that has now been informed. And, he is probably going to try all kinds of crazy things. Would he have been worse had this not happened? Will he be worse because this happened? I don't know. The man is incredibly unstable and unpredictable. But I think the Democrats did the right thing in at least informing the larger public. And yes, I agree with you that everybody gets their information from different places. His base will stick with him. And I don't think that this in any way helps him further with his base. It's not like they can replicate people. I mean, I think they were going to get out to vote no matter what. I think that this really helped to get the message out to independents who may be getting their information from various places. And therefore, those are the people who really will make the difference. And from what we've seen from the polling, they wanted witnesses. They're not going to see this as legitimate. I think the Democrats' entire message needs to be there was no acquittal. It's not a real acquittal. It's illegitimate because there were no witnesses.
And Mike, what do you make of the pronouncements that democracy in America is dead, the rule of law does not matter, and those types of end times for America ideas?
Well, it's certainly bad. There's no question about that. And the Senate and the Senate Republicans allowed their institution to be completely humiliated and decimated in terms of its power and prestige, and they trampled on the Constitution. Is it dead yet? No, I don't think so. We still have levers to pull. We still have elections. We still have the House. We still have ways to get more information, and they're still saving it. But this administration has done everything possible to attack this democracy. There's no question about that, and consolidate power in the president.
Listen to Mike. daily, Monday through Friday, SiriusXM, channel 127, 3 to 6 Eastern. Follow him on Twitter. Mike, you are the first person I reached out to get reaction on this, and I greatly appreciate you joining me for the Impeachment Extravaganza Bonanza reaction.
Great to be with you, Pete, and always great to talk to you.
I'm so excited that Katie Phang was available to talk to me. I love watching her on MSNBC, her awesome legal analysis. She's a legal contributor there, and I'm always honored if I get to sit next to her and hope that I say words that make any sense when I'm next to her. She has her own law firm, Katie S. Phang, PA. She's awesome on Twitter, at Katie Phang, Phang. Katie, thank you for letting me call you and tape the call.
Highlight of my day, easily.
Must be a horrible day. I'm so sorry.
No, not at all.
So, let's get right to it.
Sure.
You are a trial lawyer. You went to Yale. You're a smart person. What is the difference between the trial we saw in the United States Senate and the kinds of civil or criminal trials that you participate in?
There was no trial in the Senate impeachment proceedings for the impeachment of Donald Trump, at least not a trial that I've ever participated in that looked like that. No witnesses, no introduction of evidence, either testimonial or through documents. Frankly, the only thing it was an extended PowerPoint presentation. Honestly, Pete, the acquittal was an inevitable thing. The reality is the way that the House managers put on their case should have been and should continue to be for the American public. That is your ultimate jury. That's the group of people that are empowered to go to the polls in November and vote him out of office. I do find it to be a little bit of a casual statement to say that the quote, real trial is in November. I mean, it's not. I mean, if you had a trial, you have the advocates on both sides, which you saw with the House managers and with the Trump defense team, I say loosely. But you have advocates, fine. But then you actually have to have some kind of presentation of evidence so that the collective group that comprises your quote jury, which were the Senate, that they have
Right.
something to consider other than argument, because otherwise it's just people talking at each other.
Right. Do you have any criticism, Katie, of how the House managers carried out their case? If you were in Adam Schiff's position, would you have done anything differently in the House trial, investigation, much less what you saw play out in the Senate?
Two concepts. One, it's always easy to Monday morning quarterback somebody after it's done, right? I think the only quote criticism, if you had to use that word, I would have concerning the House manager's case would have been, to some extent, there were portions I thought that were a little too long. I'm a big fan of get in, get out, because attention spans are hard to keep in any capacity. And remember, too, a lot of people are working during the day, right? So you had to really kind of get it sound bitey, and you really had to get it into just digestible nuggets that people could have and they could take away. So to the extent that I thought that maybe the presentation was a little long in the tooth, maybe that's a criticism I can have. But in terms of the kind of 30,000 foot view strategy, there has been criticism about the House managers not pursuing perhaps more of a judicial disposition of some of the major issues concerning a subpoena, that type of thing. It's a really disingenuous argument that comes from Trump's defense team that it should have been done, because we all know that there's no way it would have been resolved in enough time. So this bizarre talking out of both sides of the mouth concept that there was a rush to judgment or a rush to get this trial done, and then simultaneously saying that this has just been a long witch hunt is just bull. So I think that they were damned if they did, damned if they didn't. And I think that they had to take what they had. But I am kind of disappointed that there wasn't more of a reaction concerning the Article 2 obstruction count, is what we'll call it, because that in and of itself was proof positive right there, right? That the obstruction was the non-production of evidence and witnesses. So you would feel like that would have been kind of a slam dunk or a layup, but apparently it wasn't. But that was just down to numbers.
You just gave me a layup for my final question, which was what witnesses and what evidence, Katie, would you have liked to have seen? And do you think we will now see it come out in other ways through journalism?
Well, sure. The John Bolton concept is for me a no-brainer. I mean, Bolton was your firsthand, information there. And the thing about Bolton, why I would care about him before I would say, give me a Pompeo or give me a Mulvaney, is Bolton, right? Because Bolton has nothing.
I just like the way you said that.
Trust me, hard pass on any of them. But Bolton, man, he has nothing to lose. He can just stand there and watch it all burn down. But remember, Trump says he fired Bolton. Bolton's like, yo, peace out. I resigned. And Bolton now is playing this cat and mouse game, which I have to give him a little bit of credit. I know people are really critical of him, but you know what? The guy, to some extent, still has to be establishment and kind of law and order-esque. But he could come forward, and he is going to, and he's going to speak through his book. And again, that's the ammo that you do. So what you do is, when you're a Dem, you take each and every nugget of information that's coming out from Bolton, Parnas, Fruman, whomever, and you make a commercial or a little, clip, and you just keep on running that against the GOP. Keep running it, and you make it about the decency of what's left of our republic in November. And it sounds perhaps trite, and maybe it just sounds a little bit too noble, but I know for a fact that when I'm boarding a plane in Miami and I'm buying a magazine and Beverly at the airport tells me, thank you for what you're doing for this country, and we have a conversation about what's happening, and Beverly tells me she's talking to her sister in New York who's talking to her family, there's going to be enough people that are going to go doing the right thing. That's what's going to happen. And that's at Katie Fang. I could fire 50 more questions at you. I want to be respectful of your time. I thank you for dropping in and out with us. Follow her on Twitter. Watch her on MSNBC. Thank you for joining me, Katie. Thank you.
Now we've got another one of my favorite smart minds in all politics. He is a columnist at the Boston Globe. He's an author of some awesome books. Buy them all and follow him on Twitter. Great follow on Twitter. Where I actually discovered him at SpeechBoy71. Michael Cohen joining me now. Michael, thank you for being a part of my impeachment extravaganza bonanza.
My pleasure. Great to be here.
So let's get to first question, which is, what does the outcome of the Senate trial mean in terms of democracy and rule of law? Is America over, Michael?
I think we're pretty screwed. I think there's no other way around it. We have, look, the President of the United States abused power blatantly, in a way that I think everyone sort of agrees upon. I mean, there really is no defense of his behavior. I've heard no good defense of anybody, any Republicans, and he's going to go unpunished for it. And if we know one thing about this president, one thing about him is that he will, if he's given an inch, he'll take a foot. And I see no reason to think that he won't continue to do things that are undemocratic, that are quasi-authoritarian, and face no consequences for it. And I think it's funny. One thing I keep seeing in the aftermath of this is people saying, "Well, we have to make him pay in November." I'm not sure why people think there's going to be a free and fair election in November. If the president is willing to, abuse his power, use his office to bring a foreign nation into a presidential election, who knows what else he's going to do? He certainly isn't worried about it being held accountable for it, or Republicans saying, you've gone too far, because it very clearly has shown that they're not going to do that. So yeah, we're in a bad place. No question about it.
What else, for example, could happen between now and the election in terms of him abusing power? Is there anything that you anticipate or would speculate or are most concerned about him now doing?
Who knows? I think you could imagine sort of worst case scenarios. You could try to have people arrested. He could try to have criminal charges against individuals. But the thing is that it's not just a factor of what Trump will do. It's that he is surrounded by people who will enable his bad behavior. What scares me more than anything else is you have an Attorney General at DOJ and Bill Barr, who has shown over and over again that he will assist Trump in whatever illegal activity he wants. It's important to remember the whistleblower complaint went to Justice Department first, and they basically said this is no big deal. You don't need to bring it. You don't need to bring it to Congress. Right. I think Barr is the sort of the X factor here, and somebody who I think you could look at and say that if Trump does something, and again, use your imagination as what that might be, that the Department of Justice will back him up. And that should scare everybody.
What do you anticipate coming out that might maybe dissuade Bill Barr or anybody else in the Senate from covering for him? What else will we see? This evidence and these documents and these witnesses that we didn't hear from, aren't we going to see them?
Yeah, but that's why we're having a vote this week on impeachment, because the Senate Republicans don't want to. They know there's more bad stuff out there, right? They know that. They want to get this over with, so they don't have to confront it, and so they'll vote to acquit him this week, probably Wednesday, and then going forward, you're going to have more information is going to come out. Bolton, who knows, maybe gets subpoenaed. His book is going to come out. And you know what Republicans are going to say? The same thing they always say. They say, "Oh, we've already done impeachment. We've moved on from this. This is old news." That's what they're going to say. I guarantee you. And it'll be forgotten. And I think, as far as the election goes, I think for some Senate Republicans, it might hurt them. But as for Trump, I'm not sure it make much of a difference. And I would be surprised, frankly, if even the Democratic nominee runs on the fact that Trump was impeached. It may happen, but I'd be surprised.
Michael, you do not think that the impeachment of the president will affect his reelection chances?
I don't. I really don't. No, I don't. In fact,
change your answer. I demand you to change your answer.
Listen. It's like just to even say those words is unbelievably distressing. But I really don't think it's going to affect anything. I mean, people have made up their minds about Trump. Republicans clearly have decided that no matter what he does, they will support him.
On the next longer conversation with Michael Cohen, which of the Democratic hopefuls have the best chance at beating President Trump in November? And I hope that you will be able to do that with me very soon. Michael, thank you.
My pleasure, as always.
Very excited to have my next guest joining me. He's one of the smartest people and best to explain anything from weather to politics to finance. You regularly saw him on MSNBC, well, pretty much in every time slot. He fills in. He works all day. Seemingly, he does not sleep. He was on in afternoons regularly. He has now got the 8 to 10 a.m. slot on weekends. MSNBC. Awesome on Twitter, at Ali Velshi. Follow him now. Thank you. Good to have a big shot.
Good to be with you, friend.
Okay, let's get to your reactions on impeachment. You're hosting this show on the weekends. You have a very smart panel. So my first question is, what point or points was one that stood out to you that a guest made over the weekend on your new show?
It was Ben Wittes from Lawfare. He's the executive editor of Lawfare, which, by the way, used to be this nerdy thing where people would post and it was like really academic lawyers. Now everybody goes to it to understand the law. And Ben was talking about Lamar Alexander, who came out the other night and said on Friday night and said he is not going to support witnesses. He knows what Trump did was wrong. He knows what he did was inappropriate. But there's going to be an election and it would be bad for Trump not to be on the ballot and not to let Americans decide on what the outcome should be. And Ben's point was, it's flawed because let's say the president was accused specifically of bribery, or as the president likes to say, shooting someone on Fifth Avenue. Mm-hmm. At some point, the Constitution prescribes a remedy for it. You can say that the House impeachment managers did not rise to the occasion and make the case, but the Constitution says if the president does X, you will try him, and that will result in an acquittal or a conviction, which will remove the president from office. Right. The Constitution doesn't say, well, if there's 9 months left, let the people decide. So right. The flawed reasoning in it is either you do what you're supposed to do, what the Constitution says the Senate is supposed to do, or you don't. And you chose not to, but you gave a flawed reasoning for why you're not doing it.
Ali Velshi, you're a longtime journalist and broadcaster. From a broadcasting and journalism point of view, weren't there some things that were done that made it difficult to cover, from the schedule of the Senate trial to the camera angles and so on? What would have created more transparency just in terms of covering this trial from your standpoint over at MSNBC and as a longtime journalist?
Well, look, first of all, I'd have just appreciated if it were a real trial. The problem with this trial is the Constitution says that the Senate shall try, and that means to test the truth, right? So as much as everybody will tell you this isn't like a trial that you'd see on Law and Order or you'd see in a normal court, the obligation was to hold a trial, and that would have involved witnesses and documents. So the difficulty in covering is secondary to the fact that we as journalists have got to make sure we are clear on the fact that they didn't fulfill their constitutional obligations. It's not whether or not the president got convicted or acquitted. That's not the point. There was very little chance that the president was going to get convicted. It's that the trial wasn't actually a trial. Now, that said, yeah, camera angles are weird. You only saw the impeachment managers or the defense counsel or a wide shot of the chamber or the Supreme Court justice. But mostly what people wanted to have was evidence, right? The whole point of this thing was a public airing. These people, members of Congress and senators, are our representatives. So they needed to see the evidence in order to adjudicate this case. We also needed to see that evidence. And the whole concept of the fact that we couldn't get enough of it, that's the transparency problem, not the mechanics of how it was out there. In fact, tens of millions of Americans watched the impeachment hearings in the House and watched the trial. It was the substance more than the mechanics.
What is your analysis and thought on what this means for our democracy, for a republic? I'm hearing all kinds of scary things being said by very smart, credible historians and legal analysts and political scientists. What does the fact that the president did not actually have a trial and there were no witnesses and there were no evidence and people are calling it a cover-up and a sham, what does this mean for the remainder of President Trump's presidency, in your opinion, from what you've heard and learned?
So late last night, I had a conversation with Danielle Moody Mills, who has a podcast called Woke AF, and I kind of love.
She's scheduled to join me on this impeachment bonanza extravaganza later. Go ahead. What did you?
Oh, okay. Well, perfect.
Yeah.
First of all, I just like saying it because it's the only opportunity I get to say AF. But Danielle made a really good point because I thought she would be really frustrated by the outcome of this, like a lot of observers are. And she said, I said, is the institution damaged? Is the fact that the United States Senate did not carry out his duty as prescribed in the Constitution, does that contribute to the fact that we are losing faith in our institutions? And she said no, because the Senate didn't fail. The senators failed.
Oh.
And people should be able to make that distinction, that the system isn't broken. The people who were administering the system were broken. And I thought that was an important distinction because unlike the people who are fighting for their rights in the Arab Spring and people all over the world who are fighting for basic rights, we still have the right to go to the ballot box and say, you know what, we picked you to do a job. You didn't do the job you were supposed to do. And to her, that's the answer. The answer remains the democracy that we, the people, continue to control. And I thought that was a much more optimistic AF view of this than I expected.
We'll ask
from Danielle.
her about that later. And finally, Ali Velshi, you have got a great reputation for fairness, which is why you get a whole bunch of people across the political spectrum to join you. Have you reached out to Republican senators to join you on MSNBC? What do you hear back from Republicans both in the House and Senate when you invite them to join you? They know you're going to be fair.
I won't say I get as many of them as I'd like to, but the invitation always stands. And I do from time to time, probably every couple of weeks, interview a Republican senator, more frequently Republican members of Congress. And I think that, my takeaway from all of this is people are really angry, and they probably have a right to be really angry. But what we can't do is decide not to listen. So I have heard arguments that I don't think are the strongest arguments from some Republicans over the course of this impeachment. But I think we are all in our corners right now, and that's not a great place for us to be in politics. So whether or not Donald Trump reaches out and starts to do his job to heal the country or unify us or bring us together, starting at the State of the Union, which I don't think is going to happen, I think I'm going to take Danielle's view that it's not necessarily all the politicians' jobs. It's our jobs.
Ali Velshi on Twitter, at Ali Velshi, Saturdays and Sundays now 8 to 10 a.m. That's the right plugs. That's where you're at. That's how to find you.
That's perfect.
Your home address, please.
Absolutely. I'll just get that for you right now.
Okay, we're on it. Thank you, sir.
You bet.
You see him as a national security expert on MSNBC. He is at the Foreign Policy Research Institute and former Army and national security expert Clint Watts on Twitter, at Selected Wisdom. Clint, thank you for a few minutes of your time on a Sunday. I wanted to first just ask you, of course, about the national security implications in terms of what the president did, what he basically admitted to doing, what even Republican senators have admitted that he did in terms of Ukraine and the pressure campaign. What are the concerns? Why was that a bad thing from a national security point of view?
I think the big part to think about is how many U.S. government personnel across many different agencies were pursuing a strategy to help Ukraine in its fight against Russia. And so what the president did was he essentially took a national security policy, a foreign policy strategy, and undermined it by pursuing his own political goals, which was to essentially sully Joe Biden going into the election. But not only did he do that, he did it through a parallel process. So the implications being, if you're Ukraine, you don't understand exactly why you're not getting the aid that was already committed to you. You're planning to use that aid, Javelin missiles, other things to try and fight against the Russians, defend yourself. simultaneously, you have a secondary line of the president's lawyer and others conducting influence, which seems like the official government reps know nothing about or can't figure out what the strategy is. And not till sometime later do they figure it out. So you're undermining the authority of official U.S. government representatives, confusing your allies, and at the same time hurting their fight. So then now we're sending aid that's delayed, that may be squandered or wasted. You've got military personnel out on the front lines working either as defense attachés or liaisons. You've got State Department diplomats that suddenly have no authority because their Ukrainian government doesn't know what to think. And imagine even on a CIA agent or FBI legal attaché out there, when you're interfacing with the Ukrainian government, they're probably like, well, who should I listen to here? Because this guy, Rudy Giuliani, and some of his friends are telling me one thing and you're telling me another, and the U.S. government doesn't even know what they're talking about. So I think it undermines the capabilities, the credibility, and the trust with all of our officials around the world. And at the same time, man, does this help Russia? I mean, Russia has wanted to essentially claim Ukraine, and they've already done so successfully in Crimea, and they're well on their way in the Donbass region. And so it really seems as if the president almost is kind of aiding Russia in terms of annexing those places back by weakening our alliance there. So the damage is almost a ripple effect over time. And I don't know if I were any ally of the United States right now, I would have much confidence in either what President Trump says or what official U.S. government reps say.
Right.
And that's really dangerous, for all Americans.
No way to run a country because you're sending constant mixed signals to our friends and allies, and the wrong signals, most of us would agree, to our enemies like Russia. The president was emboldened after he got away with, if you will, the Mueller investigation was concluded. And people say he made the phone call right away and pressured Ukraine. Now there's concern that since he will be acquitted by these senators who did not even really give him a trial, he will be emboldened to do something worse or more. Clint Watts, you're the national security expert. What concerns do you have that the president will either invite interference from a foreign country or take it over the campaign period?
For sure. And yes, if that makes sense. So in terms of foreign interference and inviting it, look, if he gets away with it this time, then why, if you're a foreign country, maybe you've been sitting on the sidelines and you wanted to help President Trump, or maybe you wanted to help President Trump's opponents, you might be like, you know what? Maybe there's no consequence for this. I want to get involved, right? You're almost inviting a multipolar interference effort, right, in our elections. We don't want that. I think the other part is more with President Trump and his use of institutions as in pursuit of his interest rather than the country's interest. There's never really a clear strategy stated that I've heard around what our foreign policy is. President Trump only talks about things in terms of they need to pay us, or what do we get out of it, or more specifically, what does he get out of it? You hear that in terms of our presence in Korea, in the Middle East. And that's why he's fallen, just completely fallen apart relationship-wise with his own national security advisors. 3 of them now, right? It's just continuous churn through these institutions. And the other part is he's made statements like we leave troops in Syria because of the oil, which is ridiculous. Part of the reason Al-Qaeda was founded was under the idea that the U.S. was only in the Middle East because of oil. And then you have the president just state that. Those sort of things aren't a good foreign policy strategy. They have weakened us tremendously around the world. And I would point out that the reason why countries like Germany and the UK are now open to Chinese technology like Huawei is because we've let those alliances weaken. That wouldn't have happened 4 years ago. They would have stuck with us. But now they sort of see it as we need a reliable, stable partner. And China seems to be one that's more reliable and stable over time than the U.S. at this point.
That is Clint Watts at Selected Wisdom on Twitter. Get his book. It's so good. Messing with the Enemy. Watch his TED Talk and read everything he's writing. Clint, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Very excited he was available. He is one of my all-time favorites to talk to and especially to follow on Twitter. I am addicted to his Twitter feed the way he is addicted to something that he's about to tell me he's addicted to. At Ellie NYC is also the justice correspondent at The Nation. Read him there, where I love to subscribe and read him. Ellie Mistal at Ellie NYC. Hi, thank you. What are you addicted to?
Look, I can't remember the taste of food or the touch of grass. I have watched the impeachment coverage from gavel to gavel. And all I can tell you is that I have an emergency dental appointment scheduled for tomorrow because.
Okay, there you go. So I thought you had been watching it based on Twitter. You watched it, so we didn't have to. Thank you. What is your top line takeaway in terms of the Democrats' performance? It seemed like you really respected Adam Schiff and what he did. Anything that they did wrong could have done better?
I don't think so. I think that there is such honor and dignity in the way that these Democratic House managers fought what is ultimately a losing battle, and what was a lost cause they must have known even going into it. But they stood up for the rule of law in a way that will be transmitted down through the generations of this is how you fight. So often being a Democrat, I make the joke, Pete, that, I'm a Democrat and a Mets fan, and a lot of times those things are exactly the same.
Well, I'm a Jets fan.
Like a
yes.
base level of incompetence that kind of runs through your fandom. But here, this time, this was 1986. This was a team of Democrats that was ready for the challenge. You know what? They might lose. It seems obvious that they will lose. And that they fought anyway, I think is something to be remembered and something to be praised.
Okay, so what is your biggest concern, having seen all of it, in terms of what this means during the election period, the campaign period, or the hopeful remainder of Trump's time as our president? In terms of what he's emboldened to now do.
There was a lot of ways, even if they were going to acquit him, there were a lot of ways this could have gone. Instead of kind of acquitting him on the most narrow grounds, on the most narrow, what he did was clearly wrong and bad and awful, but there's an election coming up or whatever. By acquitting him, if they acquit him on these grounds, what they will have done is accept a radical, unhinged theory of executive power, the likes of which we have not seen in Western civilization since the fall of monarchs in Europe. All right, like this is when Dershowitz's argument about what a president can and cannot do is akin to Louis XIV's argument that l'état c'est moi. I am the state. It is a conception of the presidency that makes the president the only national being, the only public interest. And it is dangerous. It has been rejected by the Age of Enlightenment. It's been rejected by Thomas Jefferson, and it has been reanimated by, Mitch McConnell and Alan Dershowitz and Jay Sekulow. It's gross, and it's a problem because I think that, as we saw with the Mueller report, the day after the Mueller report is when the Ukraine call happens, right? So what the hell is Trump going to do the day after he gets acquitted, knowing full well that literally there is nothing the Republican Party will do to stop him? The Republican Party has authorized him to go out there and steal the election with foreign interference. That's the fear.
And he packs his bowl, gets ready to take hit after that response. Ellie, what about Republican senators? Knowing what they know, admitting what they have admitted, how would you articulate what their vote against seeing witnesses and evidence was for? Why did they vote against it?
Well, I think that a lot of, if you looked online, a lot of the immediate reaction was GOP cowards, right? That was the hashtag. Mm-hmm. I don't think cowards is the right word. Cowardice is almost a sympathetic thing, right? Like cowardice is what happens in battle when you see a great enemy and you piss your pants and run away. It's human to be a coward in some way. This was not cowardice. This was complicity. This was enabling. This was the Republican Party not being so afraid of Trump that they couldn't do the right thing. This was the Republican Party being so greedy of power that they were willing to do the wrong thing, right? There's no reason to not see witnesses. The reason to not see witnesses is that they were afraid of the public understanding better what Trump has done. They already understand what Trump has done. They were afraid of the public getting a better read on what Trump has done. Why? Because if the public better understands what Trump has done, the public will kick Trump and the rest of them out of office. That's what they don't want. So again, it's a complicit power grab on the part of the Republican Party, not mere cowardice in the face of Mr. President heads on pikes.
If Elie Mystal were Adam Schiff or were involved, which of the witnesses would have wanted to hear from, and what would you have asked him?
Everybody's saying Bolton, so I'll just be a little counter, and Bolton's the right answer, so I'll just be a little counter narrative for funsies. I'll go with Mulvaney, because Mulvaney knows all of the answers, right? Mulvaney is the one who put the hold on the money. He knows why he did it. Now, Mulvaney might lie. Mulvaney might dissemble, but I would put Mulvaney under oath and ask him questions. And if he did not tell the truth, I would then prosecute Mulvaney for perjury later, right? Like, Mulvaney is the one I want in the barrel because Mulvaney actually knows all of the answers. Bolton can only give kind of context, right? Bolton is just there to answer the kind of what was always a ridiculous Republican defense. Oh, nobody heard Trump say quid pro quo, right? Well, Bolton's the person that heard it, and that's great. But Mulvaney is the one who actually put the hold on the money. And so his information is even more critical.
Well, I'm glad you selected him because we haven't been thinking about all the other witnesses because we've heard so much about what Bolton knew and the drug deal. Elie Mystal, I will take no more of your time, but I appreciate it. It is of great value. You are of great value. You are an American hero. Follow him on Twitter at ElieNYC. Read him. Subscribe to The Nation to support him there. Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much, Pete.
Now joining me is a regular on the podcast. Everybody likes when I talk to him about, well, anything. He's the author of Present as Prologue, a Gen Zero novella. Get it now on Amazon. He tweets at Brian Dominic. He is Brian Dominic. Bro, thank you for joining me today. And let me just start with, if anything, what do you think differently about our system or impeachment or democracy based on what you have seen play out with this impeachment investigation and trial? What does it change?
For me, in my mind, it changes absolutely nothing. I don't know that it changes anything on the ground for any people. I do see that it seems to be changing some people's opinions of our democracy, but I think that you're just starting to align with the fact that we don't really have one. And it's going to be, maybe a painful process for some people, but this isn't a development in any way, shape, or form. I mean, we don't hold presidents accountable, and we were never going to hold this president accountable. And anyone who thought otherwise or was holding out hope, I don't know what to say to them, but this doesn't change anything at all.
You do agree that Democrats had to do what they did?
Absolutely not. No, I don't think they had to. I do not think they had to in any way. No, of course not.
Why?
Because, first of all, it didn't accomplish anything. Second of all, I don't think the American people were all that interested in it. Third of all, it's just not that big of a deal what the guy even did compared to many other things that he's done and that past presidents have done. So it looks, like I told you last time, it looks weird that we're cherry picking this thing to go after a president for when we let them get away with anything. It's so obvious why Donald Trump coveted this office in particular. It's not just that you can do a lot of, be self-aggrandizing as an egoist. It's also clearly set up to protect a criminal in the office. So this doesn't change anything compared to what our democracy actually always has been all along. I don't think it does. It's set up criminality. He took the office because he has a mobster mindset. It all made sense to me in 2016. I'm not shaken by any of this.
What, if anything, does this do to you? You have said that you don't think this ranks the highest in terms of damaging our democracy. We're hearing all kinds of smart people talk about the end of democracy in rule of law as a result of he wasn't held responsible. It was a sham trial. There were no witnesses and cover up. You are pointing to other things that are far more threatening to our democracy than this. Is that right?
I mean, if you care about the outcomes of elections as democracy, then surely the Electoral College has a bigger impact on democracy than if the Ukraine were to announce that that a candidate's son was in trouble for corruption or something. It's just, there's just no comparison between the damage that we do to ourselves structurally or by policy, like disenfranchising felons, letting the Supreme Court gut the Civil Rights Act. I mean, we don't even teach civics in school, but we think that this is the problem with our democracy, is this weird, obscure thing that barely anybody followed, except for, I think, people that are already completely sucked into all this. But see, I'm not that interested in politics the way you and probably most of your listeners are. I actually don't listen to this kind of stuff very much at all. And I'm utterly unimpressed whenever I look into these kinds of things. The mainstream thrust is not representing the actual zeitgeist, the actual democratic interest in our country. I don't think at all. I think it's just a bunch of people on CNN and the New York Times driven in a certain direction because of their mindset. I have a much more populist view of this kind of stuff. I mean, there's so many things. Just gerrymandering. Like the things we tolerate and then still call ourselves a democracy and then decide that this bizarre quirk that this weird president did is the end of democracy because we didn't hold him accountable for that, even though every single president takes office, lets the last guy off the hook, explains why we should for all the horrible things that he did. Each one of them concentrates more and more power. Donald Trump saw that. This was the perfect thing. He's on a smorgasbord in the White House, and he stuffed a napkin down his shirt, and he pulled up a chair and a knife and fork, and he's digging in, and this is what we get for the system that we laid out for
What is
people.
he eating?
Ourselves. Was what? What's he eating? He's eating the fruits of corruption that we've built into this
Specifically,
system.
which fruit? Thank you, Brian Dominic. At Brian Dominic. Very refreshing point of view you're not going to hear on the rest of this show or probably anywhere else, which is why many of you will like it. At Brian Dominic, thank you. Joining me now, my friend and hero. He is on Twitter, where he is prolific and everybody loves him, at John Fugelsang. Of course, he hosts Tell Me Everything on SiriusXM Progress, 9 p.m. to midnight East. And I want to talk with him about impeachment. John, thank you for joining me. Let's dive right in. Do you think... It's my new... I don't know if you knew, that's my new character I'm playing on the podcast. John!
I love it. Am I playing for the full dinette set?
Let's get right to it. Okay. What did you make of the president's lawyers and of the defense in the Senate trial, John?
Where do I begin? I mean, there's already one sequel to Suicide Squad coming out this month. It was amazing watching like Ken Starr and Alan Dershowitz arguing for Donald Trump, because all three of them are Horcruxes for Jeffrey Epstein's soul. So that was a harmonic convergence of Hogwarts proportions the other day. I owe an apology to the reboot of Mad About You. I was wrong. It turns out the worst possible 90s reboot is Ken Starr at an impeachment trial. And I completely apologize to the makers of Mad About You.
It's a great point.
Ken Starr, once upon a time, he impeached a president for lying about fellatio. And this week we saw him perform fellatio on an impeached lying president.
Oh, dear.
So it's the circle of douchebaggery. Yes. And, and then there's Pam Bondi, of course, who there's no better way to show your respect for Pam Bondi's and her ethics than to make a substantial cash donation right now to Trump University. Really, because your listeners are smart enough to know. I don't even have to tell your listeners why Pam Bondi is corrupt and why her appearance was hilarious, except for the fact we're all talking about her hypocrisy as she goes after Hunter Biden. She's a Biden hunter. We're on her hypocrisy because, Trump paid her $25,000 for her reelection, and she dropped her investigation into Trump University back in 2013.
That's right. Look it up.
What she didn't reveal was that she just registered last summer as a foreign agent for our friends, the royal family of Qatar, and she receives $115,000 a month from the royal family of Qatar just for being special, which I went to public school, but I think that's more than twice what Hunter Biden was making from his foreign company.
Wow. I wonder who books that.
She's literally registered as a foreign agent.
Asking for a friend. How do you get that gig? John, next question. Corruption is what the president stated he was going after and wanted to fix in Ukraine. You've long beat the drum that he is the most corrupt person. How hard has it been for you to swallow Donald Trump talking about corruption?
I can't say he's the most corrupt president we've ever had because, honestly, lying into war that kills 1 million Iraqi people and over 5,000 American soldiers is probably more corrupt than money laundering for the Russians through crap New York real estate. Yes. But he's the most corrupt person we've ever elected office. He told Bolton last August that he wanted to withhold the aid to coerce investigations. So we know he was cheating to win an election. And these senators are going to decide, as they did with Clinton. There are some fair comparisons to Clinton. This one's not, but they're going to say the same argument. We thought what he did was wrong, but it doesn't rise to the level of impeachment. Lamar Alexander pretty much came out and said, yes, we know the Democrats are right. He was cheating, and we're just going to give him 10 more months to try to cheat again. He will try to cheat again, and he will get caught again, and every one of these Republicans will own that. So, John Bolton, the thing about John Bolton's testimony is that it's only corroborated, Pete, by every single witness. Like every witness, every shred of testimony, the Purple Heart recipient, Lieutenant Colonel, Trump's own ambassador to the EU, all those diplomats, all the employees at the Office of Management and Budget who in their emails were terrified the president was asking them to commit a crime, the Government Accountability Office that said the president committed a crime, everyone who testified, all these people worked for Trump. There's no deep state. There's no liberals. Every bit of evidence came from a Trump employee. Biden has been accused of no crimes. Trump never asked his own DOJ to investigate the Bidens. Why do you ask a foreign government to investigate an American citizen instead of your own CIA, FBI, or your pit bull, Bill Barr? Trump didn't want an investigation, as your listeners know. He only wanted an announcement of an investigation so they could point to something that was a rumor, like a birth certificate or an email or Benghazi. Donald Trump in his life has only called for investigations into corruption against people who were against him for president. Those are the only cases of corruption he has ever called for. There's no other company in Ukraine he was worried about being corrupt. There's 2 Jeffrey Epstein lawyers defending him. That's how corrupt he is. 2 men who took, money to keep a child rapist out of jail are defending this guy. And Ken Starr's the one who turned a blind eye to gang rape at Baylor.
Look it up, everybody. Look
a little bit
into
more.
it.
Because Ken Starr warning us about impeachment is like Gargamel warning about Smurf abuse.
Hey.
You got Jay Sekulow and Pat Cipollone, who are just on TV competing for Mr. Trump to give them the rose.
Oh.
You got Pam Bondi, who's saying, oh, well, what the Death Star did is totally irrelevant compared to the corruption that was happening on Alderaan. That's her whole argument.
Hey, now.
And you have the contractors who trusted him. They were wrong. The students who paid to go to his university, they were wrong. The donors who donated to his scam fraud charity, they were mistaken. The wives who married him, I don't even need to go there, but I'm just going to say when Trump finally dies, Pete Dominic, at the funeral, Melania is bringing a date. Also, this is happening while he's negotiating with Israel, while Netanyahu is under indictment because he's corrupt. He's also negotiating with Saudi Arabia after they chopped up an American journalist. He also is in love with Vladimir Putin after all the intel shows he hacked our election, hacked our electrical grid. We never talk about that. And he poisons people in the UK. He loves Kim Jong-un, whose prisons beat to death an American citizen. Donald Trump does not care about corruption. He's only cared about it twice in his life when he could hurl it at 2 people who were beating him in all the polls. Also, Zelensky gave in and agreed to announce the investigation on CNN. And when the truth came out, Zelensky canceled the CNN appearance. That's all the proof you need of coercion. The call never mentioned corruption.
For more, listen to John Fugelsang on SiriusXM Progress, at John Fugelsang on Twitter. Thank you for your brilliance, your thoughtfulness, your humor, your analysis, and your friendship.
Can I ask your take, please? All I know from this impeachment, Pete, is that I'm never going to vote for Hunter Biden. But what do you think?
Nobody gets my take. Moving on, Fugelsang.
Thanks, Pete.
Love you, pal. Thank you. Joining me now, old friend of mine and the old show, and I look forward to having a longer conversation with him, but this is the Impeachment Extravaganza Bonanza, where we're getting quick takes, yet thoughtful takes from all my friends who I think are far more intelligent than I am and have a lot to say about this. Joining me now, at Matt Welch on Twitter. He is editor-at-large at Reason Magazine, and he's very, very often a guest on Real Time, far more often than I am. Very jealous, and I'm very happy that you're here. Hi, Matt Welch.
Hi, Pete Dominic. Thank you for having me.
All right, let's get to it. Big questions about impeachment. First and foremost, do you think the president is going to react to this in terms of thinking he can do whatever he wants, become a wrecking ball after you had the Mueller investigation? He made this phone call. Now he gets away with this. What is he going to do next? Are you concerned?
Of course, I'm concerned he's going to do more of the same, and he's going to know that there will not be any institutional Republican political constraints on his behavior. So look forward to even clumsier and more obvious missteps and acts of corruption.
How would you describe, that sounds great, how would you describe Republicans' vote against evidence and witnesses? What does that mean for them? Why did they do it? What is your reaction to the way they handled it in the Senate and decided not to get more evidence?
It's the final capitulation to Trump. I mean, keep in mind, something like 11 senators did not endorse him in 2016. They were so appalled by the guy. Go back and read the National Review against Trump issue from January of 2016 and see how many of those people are now his biggest apologists. He has brought almost every institution within the broader conservative big tent to heel. Freedom Caucus, the Senate, any number of people. Fox News, he ran against them last time. So he successfully done it. This was the surrender. This was the white flag. People who hate his guts are more afraid of his voters, and they don't, even the ones who are retiring, lack basic civil courage.
Wow. To heal all those institutions. What a way to put it. Yes. Yeah. Okay. So what about what this means for the presidential election? Is this going to hurt Trump? Is this going to help Democrats? Is it going to hurt Democrats and help Trump? Will anybody remember it by November, Welch?
I don't know if many people will remember it. I think the biggest impact will be not on the presidential election. It will be on the re-election prospects for Republican senators, because they caved to the dominant personality. That doesn't mean that they became more likable. They actually become less likable even among conservatives, right? Like, they did the master's bidding, but they ain't the master. They're going to have this and their incredibly pretzel-like logic defending their moves, like Lamar Alexander, although he's not running for re-election. They're going to have that pushed in their faces the entire time. I think now that the fact that it's going to be over is going to probably help Democrats, just in that they can campaign on things. But I think it's marginal. I don't think it's been really driving the way that political consumers have been reacting to the Democratic race so far. From everything that I've seen, town halls are not dominated by questions about impeachment, even if Trump looms gigantic in the imagination both of pro and anti-Trump. It's just, I think people are sort of split on how to approach that.
And finally, Matt Welch, what does the outcome of the impeachment, the Senate acquittal, he's gotten away with it. What does it mean for our institutions? What does it mean for the rule of law? What does it mean for democracy? Earlier, my brother said, this is no big deal. We got to worry about gerrymandering and voter suppression and the Electoral College. That does a lot worse things for the health of democracy and balance and fairness than this. What does it all mean?
I am in rare agreement, semi-agreement with your brother. Just in that, look, this has been a process basically since Richard Nixon, when there was sadly, the response to Richard Nixon compared to the response now among Democrats back then was much more robust. It was, hey, look, we need to trim back the power that has accrued in the presidency itself. We don't really hear nearly enough of that kind of talk among Democrats right now. We need a rebalancing between the legislative branch and the executive branch. The Senate acquiescing on the Republican side shows that they're no longer serious about that. So we're in a bad patch, and we're also in a bad patch because we have a rise globally of both right kind of authoritarian populism of the Donald Trump side, but also left kind of Peronist populism that we see in Argentina. And you could say that Bernie Sanders, who I like better than Trump, but still is an avatar of that. Populist moments are not moments that end up very well, either for populists or for the rest of us. So I'm a lot worried about that long term, yet this micro moment isn't necessarily the individual death knell. Look, we have an election coming up. If Trumpism is absolutely repudiated, we will look back at this a lot differently than we do now.
That's Matt Welch, at Matt Welch. Read him at Reason Magazine. Subscribe there. I know for a damn fact you have a piano right next to you. Play us out. Put that phone down and play us out.
Let's see what I can do here. This is a Matt Welch composition.
Matt Welch, everybody.
Thanks, Pete.
Joining me now, my good friend, and you can see him on CNN, where he's a senior political analyst. He is on Twitter at PrestonCNN, hosts his own show on SiriusXM's POTUS channel, and he is right now in Iowa. What is the temperature?
It is really nice
right?
out, Pete. It is, no, it really is. Like you can walk outside without a jacket. It's about 40, which is amazing because every other time I've come to Iowa, it is, blizzard, snow, frigid cold. Here we are.
All right. Well, then it is mild with a chance of any impeachment talk during the campaign. The caucuses we'll pretend we're live today. And are these candidates talking about impeachment? Is it coming up? Is it coming up with the Iowans?
You know where it's coming up? It's coming up with a turn to this argument of electability where we're starting to see the candidates really try to showcase that in their closing arguments to these Iowa voters. Specifically, can you beat Donald Trump? I can beat Donald Trump. No, look, I can beat Donald Trump. No, the other candidate says, I can beat Donald Trump. And you're hearing that louder and louder in these closing hours before these Iowans go to cast their ballots there.
So are the voters themselves, is there a lot of chatter about impeachment, or are they all focused on the caucuses that they're all going to go in the gyms and the public schools and stand in corners and it's so weird?
Yeah, it is. It is very weird, but it's very Americana.
Right.
So, I mean, in that sense, it's very strange. Look, we could have like a 3-hour
This is
dissertation
impeachment
about
talk with
whether
Preston.
This
is the Impeachment Extravaganza Bonanza episode of Stand Up Pete Dominic. So here's my next question. How much does impeachment affect the presidential campaign overall, Mark Preston? Is this going to be done and over with? Old news,
all right,
fake news.
Let me say it this way. It's impeachment has a very dark cloud, right, over the whole country. It certainly has had a great impact on how these presidential campaigns are being run, how they're being operated. Half the field has to be in Washington because they have to vote in the Senate. So there is that there. I do think that there is a level of exhaustion about discussion of impeachment because I think people are just tired by it. Now, having said that, it doesn't mean that they don't think that it should happen. They don't think that the Senate's doing its job or what have you. But when you're talking to Democratic activists, they're trying to funnel all of that into trying to defeat Trump in November. Because, look, it's a fait accompli. We know what's going to happen. He's going to be acquitted by the Senate, and boom, we're going to move on. The most interesting thing, though, Pete, is that he is still going to be impeached before the Senate then weighs in on his behalf, and he'll be given a State of the Union while that's still hanging over his head. And I don't think that the Trump White House is very happy about that.
What about the Republican senators? Have you talked to any of those senators? Why did they vote, Mark, against seeing evidence and witnesses in a case where there was so much evidence and there is so much yet to learn? What was that vote about? Were they scared? Were they think they're never going to get another job again? All their friends are going to abandon them. There will be death threats. The president will ruin them. Why would they possibly not vote to allow? Were they part of the crime?
Well, how about this? I can't speak for any specific senator, right? I mean, he or she has to come out and say whatever reasons are, and then their constituents, the voters, their colleagues, their friends, whatever. They're going to have to make a decision. But I will say this. If you look at the overall political picture, a couple of reasons why. You have a Republican-led United States Senate. You have control of the White House and every lever of government. Republicans, specifically conservatives, have been able to get through measures, rollbacks, as you talk about very often, of these of regulations and whatnot that have been put in place. They've been able to achieve huge success when it comes to that. So that's one reason politically. The second reason is there is fear amongst many Republicans, who may be facing voters, that if they don't support President Trump now, then those Trump voters not only will not go to the polls for them, but they'll campaign actively against them. So there is a fear. There is a fear there.
There are no brave patriots left.
I like to think I'm brave, and I would like to say that Tom Brady, who is a New England Patriot,
we were breaking up there at the end, Mark. Couldn't hear the signal. I think you're talking about football, but I don't know. I'm not positive. At Preston CNN, follow him there. And Mark, will be watching you in Iowa. Thank you very much for joining me from Iowa on your Sunday. Appreciate it.
Mr. Dominic, take care.
Very happy I got her in between television and radio. She never stops working and talking. I'm glad she could spend 5 minutes with me on the Impeachment Extravaganza Bonanza. Danielle Moody Mills at D2Cents, DEE 2 cents on Twitter, host of Woke AF Daily, which is a great show at DNR Studios. Everybody should listen to her there every day. Danielle Moody Mills, thank you for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me.
It was pretty cool. Earlier, I was talking to our friend Ali Velshi. He gave you a shout out when I was asking what smart people he's talked to that made great points that he would want to resonate or repeat. And I said, she's going to be here later. He said it was about a question about what this means for the reputation and institution of the United States Senate. What does it mean? The impeachment acquittal?
Yeah, I think that it means that we can no longer place our hopes and dreams on representatives, on the Republican Party. They have become a cult of Donald Trump. And I think that what's important for the American people to realize is that we still have power. As much as, the Republicans would have us believe that Donald Trump is a king, we, the American people, still have power. And in 270 plus days, we have the power to vote him out. We've waited for impeachment. We waited for the Mueller report. We waited for Republicans to develop a spine. And that didn't happen. And so no one is coming to save us. We're the ones that are going to have to save ourselves come Election Day.
How concerned are you about what President Trump will now do, having gotten away with it again?
I mean, I'm pretty sure that he'll continue on the path of criminality that he has been doing since he took his oath on Inauguration Day. I'm pretty sure that Donald Trump will be more emboldened than ever. Look, the Ukraine call happened, but a few months after he felt like he was exonerated by the Mueller report, which in fact he was not. Because if you remember that Robert Mueller said if we had enough information to exonerate the president, we would have said so in the report. We did not. So I think that what Republicans have opened up is a Pandora's box that they're not going to be able to close. And this is going to be how people remember them and what their legacy will be.
What do you think Democrats might have done better at the impeachment hearing in the House? Did they get anything wrong? What about the performance in the Senate in terms of the impeachment managers, much less the questions that were asked? I guess that's the only role or responsibility Democratic senators got.
I mean, to be honest, I think that the House managers did a valiant job. I think that Adam Schiff will go down in history as a patriot. I think that the House managers that Nancy Pelosi appointed were brilliant. They all had law enforcement backgrounds or understanding of the constitutionality of this moment and the gravity of this moment. I think that they did everything that they could possibly do. But there's nothing that you can really do against an entire party that decides to be political ostriches and bury their heads in the sand and pretend that Donald Trump isn't a criminal and that they are not accomplices now in a crime, which is the biggest cover-up in American history.
Who would you have wanted to hear from in terms of the witnesses? A lot of people, of course, are saying John Bolton. Elie Mystal made a great point because everybody's saying Bolton about Mulvaney. If you were asking questions to any one of these people, Giuliani, Lev Parnas, Mike Pompeo, Mike Pence, who would it be? What would you ask?
I think it would be John Bolton. And the question that I would want to ask is the same question Adam Schiff wanted to ask. What did you mean when you said that this was a drug deal? Right? What did you mean by that? Because when anybody uses the term, well, this is a drug deal, and I sure as hell want to get out of that, it's not a good sign. Right. So I want to dig into John Bolton. And again, the same thing with Lev Parnas. Like, he pretty much put out his entire laundry of his relationship with Donald Trump, his kids, people in the administration. I mean, I've never seen more selfies and more videos than anybody has ever taken. I thought maybe I needed to check my phone if I had a picture with Lev Parnas. So I think that there is a lot of questions that these people should have been asked and should still be asked, frankly, because, look, even though this sham of a trial will be done and Midnight Mitch will, acquit this criminal president. The fact is that Donald Trump is still being tried by the American people until November. And so there are questions that still should be asked, and we should be seeking those answers from those individuals that were in the room.
Finally, what does impeachment mean for the election, the campaign, the candidates, Danielle?
I think that people need to let this be the scarlet letter that it is on Donald Trump and his entire administration. And I think that we need to do everything in our power so Donald Trump goes down in history as the first president to be impeached in his first term and only term as president of the United States. There needs to not be a debate, a conversation where whoever the Democratic nominee is not talking about the fact that Donald Trump is a criminal and he is an impeached president and he will be impeached forever, as Nancy Pelosi said.
Can you name any qualities about Donald Trump that you like? Forget it. I just had to. I can't. Danielle, thank you very much. Appreciate your time as always. Listen to her on Woke AF Daily, DNR Studios. Follow her right now on Twitter at D2Cents Recording. Okay, one of my all-time faves on right now. She is awesome on Twitter at Behind Your Back. She's the executive director of Tax March, and she is now my guest on the Impeachment Extravaganza Bonanza episode of The Smartest People I Know that are in my phone. Maura Quint, thank you for joining me. Did you pay close attention to the impeachment hearings? Did you drop everything and watch them?
I watched more than I wanted to, definitely. I kept trying to avoid it, and there was just no way, unfortunately,
all right.
For me.
I want to get your reactions to a bunch of specific things. First of all, why did these Republicans not vote to see the evidence and hear from witnesses? How would you describe that vote and their allegiance, I guess, to the president?
Yeah, they obviously have made a clear choice about which side they're on, not even a Democrat-Republican, but just a all-in to support Donald Trump or not. And they have, I guess, decided that there's so much that can benefit them by supporting him that they're all in for him, which is upsetting, but unsurprising.
What about Mitt Romney? Give him any credit?
None. Not an ounce. No, I really don't. I don't have anything too nice to say about a single one of the Republicans.
Read the profile of him in the New York Times?
I did not.
What did you do instead?
I did not. Anything else at all. I probably drank a little bit.
Okay, so what does it mean, the impeachment results and the fact that the president has seemingly gotten away with it again, as he seemingly has gotten away with everything that he's ever done to people and society in his life? What does it mean for our democracy, for the rule of law, for our social fabric, for the election?
Well, I mean, he has gotten away with everything he's ever done. This is not really any big surprise. However, he was impeached in the House. That's no small thing. It did happen. We can't say that didn't happen.
Good point.
It did happen. So there is something there. The fact that these Republicans voted not to have witnesses is a really interesting thing. And to me, it reminds me of 2017 when we had that Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, otherwise known as the Trump tax scam. And all of these Republicans voted in favor of it. That was 2017, the end of 2017. And you know what 2018 was? An election year. Same sort of situation. The 2017 tax bill, they all voted for, and it was just a huge, huge tax cut for the rich. And Democrats in 2018 ran on that. And they ran on, hey, look what your representative voted in favor of. They voted in favor of giving themselves a huge tax break. They voted in favor of giving the rich something extra. And now, we have the same thing. Sorry, go ahead. So, I'm in 2020.
Well, is what you're saying that the president, they voted, they will let the president commit any crime he wants as long as their agenda gets passed?
I'm saying you now have on the record a bunch of Republicans saying, we don't even want to see witnesses. And the one thing that American people truly actually do not like overall, I mean, there's, people who will get away with it, but people don't like cheating. They don't like it. They really don't. And that's what the tax bill ended up looking like. Ended up being lying and cheating and scamming. And that's a lot what this is. We're just going to scam the system. We're not even going to have any witnesses. That's a great thing for Democrats to have, to be able to run on and to run and oppose the Republicans who voted.
Okay, so do you think there's anything that Democrats should have done differently? Should they have impeached him earlier for different crimes? Do you think that they handled this decently? Do you have any criticism for either the House managers, the Democrats in the House, or anything in the Senate?
Do I have any criticisms for the Dems? Maybe sometimes one or two, occasionally. Yeah, I think there was a lot more that they should have thrown into this that they avoided. I think a lot of the financial crimes that were evident were things that they really should have gone harder after. I know that was going to be hard to do because he wasn't going to hand over his tax returns, et cetera, et cetera. But I think there was a lot more there that they really should have pursued because I think it needs to be brought to light. And if he's going to be fighting against it, that needs to be on display as well. And I think they rushed through trying to be like, we just need to push through a vote. And I don't necessarily think that was the right call.
How much will voters care about what we just saw happen and play out with impeachment come November, 270 some days away?
So I I think it'll only matter as much as the Dems can make it matter, because ultimately, there's a lot going on. People are constantly getting sort of pulled into this thing or that thing. And it's hard to sort of hold on to these ideas. Again, this is the same thing we saw with the tax bill, now the tax law. It would have been easily forgotten, except that Dems made a point of like bringing this up and making it center. And so I think if they do that, it will matter. But if they don't, then yeah, I think it'll fall apart. I don't think anyone's holding on to this as something that they're going, I'm going to rage on this for 9 months and then vote.
Maura Quint, I am so happy you were available today. At Behind Your Back on Twitter, where she is prolific, and support organization Tax March, taxmarch.org, right?
That's right. I'm going to go back to making 100 dips now.
Thank you, Maura. Have fun. Joining me now, one of my favorites, one of your favorites, the legal eagle, Eric Siegel, constitutional law professor at Georgia State University, author of great books. Let's get right to it, Siegel. Thank you for joining me. I know you wanted to talk about the president's defense, his lawyer, specifically Jay Sekulow, who is a great American patriot. What did you want to say about him? You know him?
Yeah, so first of all, I do want to say that this is as low as I've been since November 2016. This was a debacle and a sham, but one of the worst things that happened over the last week or so is Jay Sekulow getting national attention as the president's lawyer. Jay Sekulow is a lawyer who made his mark winning one Supreme Court case that was very easy to win, but he did a good job on it. And after that, he was hired by Pat Robertson to basically be lawyer for the evangelicals. According to an AP, but everybody knows, Pete, everybody knows that he is quite shady. There are substantial questions raised about how he gets paid and by whom. AP reported on January 31st this year that over $65 million of charity money has been funneled to his family. And he is a man who should not be anywhere near the White House. And for example, the charity that he actually works for has 6 lawyers who are on President Trump's defense team, according to Senate documents. Charities are simply not allowed to do that kind of thing. They have to be under the rules of the IRS. They have to be apolitical. There's good reason to believe that he, his group, his people are violating all kinds of laws. But even forgetting that, the reason why Jay Sekulow hit me so hard this week is because it takes me all the way back to the 1970s and long before Jay Sekulow was involved. And the very unholy alliance between Ronald Reagan, Ed Meese, the Republican Party, Jerry Falwell, Pat Robertson, and the evangelicals. And what they did is they merged to create a strong political force basically on the back of Roe versus Wade. And Reagan made many public speeches talking about abortion being a Holocaust. Reasonable people can disagree about abortion. It's not a Holocaust in the sense of that term being used.
Right.
And that Reagan would have been elected anyway, but that alliance gave him a landslide election, changed the entire face of the Republican Party. And I've said this before to you, when Ronald Reagan announced Sandra Day O'Connor as his first Supreme Court justice, he fulfilled a very good campaign promise to make a woman a Supreme Court justice, the first one. The evangelicals went crazy because they weren't sure where she was on abortion. Mm-hmm. And there was a meeting with Ed Meese, Reagan's, I forget exactly what his title was at the time before he was Attorney General, where Ed Meese made that all right. And he promised them the next one would be Bork and then maybe Scalia and so on. But that alliance between the Republican Party and the evangelicals is the only reason Trump got elected. If that alliance doesn't exist, Trump does not get elected. 20 to 25% of the American people said the most important issue to them in 2016 was the Supreme Court of the United States. 56% of those voted for Trump. So Jay Sekulow being on national television, looking like a real lawyer and being the president's attorney, when in fact he is a shyster, he is corrupt, and he is very much in the web of Pat Robertson, Jerry Falwell Jr., and that entire segment of our political community is the most troubling and discouraging thing for me, because they are, I want to say this carefully, Pete. Yeah. I have so many friends who are people of faith. I respect people of faith. I wish I had more faith.
Why is that alliance unholy?
because Pat Robertson, Jerry Falwell Jr., Jerry Falwell's father, Jerry Falwell, and that entire branch of evangelicals, they're not in it for faith. They're in it for money. That's why Jay Sekulow has $65 million being paid. By the way, it's incredibly unclear who is paying him for his defense of President Trump.
Will we ever know?
I doubt it because the evangelicals have infiltrated the White House, our government, in a way that is unbelievably dangerous to the American people.
Who's paying Jay Sekulow?
We don't know.
That's the question. What about
we know.
Hold
on. We know one thing, real quick.
Go.
One thing. The Republican National Committee has paid him $250,000 since 2017. But here's where it gets sticky. He has a for-profit law firm that doesn't even exist. It has a mailbox. They're paying him to his for-profit law firm. But what's benefiting is the evangelical charities. And it's that alliance that is making me very, very nervous.
What about the Dersh?
I challenged him to a debate, said I'd pay his expenses. He declined because he made an open invitation.
Did you offer him a massage?
That I will not do. The best tweet I had in the last week was I said, so Harvard Law School has more money than 10 law schools combined. And I have a lot of friends at Harvard. But what I said was the Dersh is the first time in my life I felt a little bad for Harvard Law School because he was a professor there. He just embarrassed himself. I would hope his legal career is over. But Pete, you know what it is about him, right? I'm going to say something really controversial.
He's great on TV.
It's about Israel.
Oh, right. Yes, why for him about Israel? He's defending Trump because he wants Israel to get everything that they want. And certainly if you pay attention to that horrific proposal that Jared put together because he read a bunch of books, you would think they are getting what they get. And your suspicion is he is more loyal to Israel and cares more about that than anything else.
Certainly more than the rule of law or an honest accounting of constitutional history.
Well, how does this affect the upcoming election? What does this mean for the rule of law and for the future of democracy? How dispirited are you?
So everything I've said before is kind of in my position as a law professor. Now as a position as a citizen, I am extremely dispirited because we know what happens to narcissists when they get what they want. They become more narcissistic. And we all know that Trump is going to cheat as much as he can. He's going to use Russia, China, Ukraine, whoever, to cheat as much as he can. This is going to enable him even more to do that. And I barely can even think about the immense, unprofessional, unethical behavior of the Senate in not calling additional witnesses. It's so dispiriting that it's almost impossible. What would 2 days? It would take them. They offered 1 or 2 days. Take bold steps.
Why didn't they call witnesses and ask for show evidence? Why?
My best guess would be because they don't want to argue the facts. They just don't want to argue. By the way, if it turns out, one quick legal thing, if it turns out that Trump's lawyer, Cipollone, was actually in the room, as Bolton alleges, or allegedly alleges, when Ukraine aid was discussed, then that is another example of how these people do not care about integrity, about law, about legal rules. We can debate politics left, right, and center. And, there are so many Republicans who I would disagree with, but who I respect. But those Republicans are gone. And these people don't care about law, ethics, professionalism. The whole thing is just so depressing. It makes me want to go to some island somewhere and just write a novel.
That is Eric Siegel. You can find him on his island working on his terrible, terrible novel. It'll be sitting in the young adult section, I'm guessing. Thank you, sir.
Mystery section. Mystery.
At Eastman Siegel. He's a mystery writer, but he's a problem solver. Thank you.
Thanks, Pete.
I'm very excited that I got Adam Pargomenko to join me here on the Impeachment Extravaganza, Bonanza, I guess I'm calling it, because he writes one of my favorite daily newsletters called Big Stuff. You must subscribe. BigStuff.us right now. He's a Democratic strategist, consultant, political advisor, and hilarious and brilliant writer. Follow him on Twitter at Adam Pargomenko. I guess that's Ukrainian, yes?
It is. I'm a Ukrainian American, born in Washington, D.C., but my father's Ukrainian.
Well, we have to really talk about your history and your past and have a long conversation getting to know you because I'm a super big fan of your social media and your newsletter. But let's get right to the questions about impeachment. First and foremost, how do you look at the outcome of the impeachment hearings and the Senate trial and what it means for the health of our democracy, the rule of law, our children's future, Adam?
I think that no one's surprised at what the outcome looks like it's going to be in terms of the acquittal. I think most people sort of thought it was always going to go that way, but we had to be on offense and hold this president accountable. I think what's been fascinating, though, is the number of Republicans, some of whom weren't even elected, like McSally in Arizona. She's in a position where she was appointed and she's up for re-election this year and still voted against witnesses. So I don't think she'll ever be elected. But it's just one huge cover up. And I do like the fact that the Republicans screwed up the rules and this thing has actually gotten pushed till Wednesday because, doesn't mean it'll change the outcome, but anything could happen. And, these Republicans who are taking the weekend that voted against witnesses, you just never know what will happen between now and Wednesday.
You think that they are the senators that are up for re-election in those swing states or more fragile states, they're going to lose support because of their votes against evidence and witnesses?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that, if you look at Cory Gardner, one of my favorite tweets after he voted against witnesses was John Weaver, who tweeted adios. I think between, McSally and Cory Gardner and others. And I think the other thing is, in a lot of these states where we're used to saying that there's no chance, that's just not been the case. If you look at Louisiana and Kentucky, Kentucky is the state or the Commonwealth where Trump has pulled the highest of any other state. And, Matt Bevin, who's basically a mini Trump, was still defeated. So, anything could happen, whether it's South Carolina, whether it's Kentucky. Matt Bevin was just as much of a cheerleader as Mitch McConnell was. And, Kentucky stepped up and refused him.
So what about Trump's hopes in November? Does this help or hurt him? We're 270 days away, Adam. What do you think? Is anybody going to care about impeachment and the fact that Republicans covered it all up? And will we know a lot more between now and then because of people like you and great journalists?
I think that, who knows, right? If I knew the answer, I'd be screaming at the top of my lungs everywhere. But I think what is interesting is, on the day of the election this past November in Kentucky, Matt Bevin had been leading up to that day and on the day of telling reporters that, the vote was actually a referendum on impeachment of the president. He was saying that everywhere he was campaigning at the very end and on election day, and he was defeated. So, I think Republicans are quick to suggest that, impeachment is a win for them. But what I've always said, and I said this a lot last year, is that only the Democratic Party and only Democrats could look at impeachment as a losing issue. If Republicans were on the other side, we know exactly what they would be doing, where they don't even have the facts that we do. So I think that, ultimately Nancy Pelosi not only went about this the right way, but, the Democrats that were the impeachment managers did an incredible job. And, over, 3 out of 4 Americans want witnesses. And that's hugely problematic, including for people like Susan Collins, who may have come and said we need witnesses and been a vote, but it was very transparent why she did that. She did that because McConnell still had the votes, and she didn't lobby her colleagues. And she truly wanted witnesses. She could have moved other people, and I think that will, cost her seat 9 months from now.
And one of the greatest pieces of political analysis I've ever read during the Trump era or any other time last week or recently in your daily newsletter is where I found it, bigstuff.us. You told a yarn, a metaphor of sorts, which compared the idea that Trump supporters can't smell their own. Well, it was very scatological. So my question, and it was awesome, and everybody should read it, and there was a lot of references to the smell of shit. Adam, does the acquittal of the president change the opinion of anybody who is a big MAGA Trump supporter?
I think that, thank you for that. And as I mentioned to you earlier, but not when we were sort of on the air here, is I have a colleague who does quite a bit for the newsletter, and he's a former White House reporter who one of these days hopefully will go public. It's a great question, but I think, look, we know exactly what they're going to do. and they're going to take this as a win. He's not going to be able to use the State of the Union as a platform to claim this as a win, although he'll probably do it anyways. And I think the fact is that, a lot of people think that this is some anomaly. Trumpism is here to stay. And that's why, I always say weakness invites aggression, and Democrats have to go out there and not just be on offense, but it's like a school bully. They take your lunch money on the first day of school. They're going to take it every single day. And you have to put a stop to that. And so, there's a lot of folks that have been really, Chris Murphy's been incredible, I think, over and over and over again. And we need people to continue to do that. I have no idea what's going to happen in November with the presidential, but I think the key is in a parallel here, we have got to take back the Senate. And I think as soon as we get through this week, we still hold the majority in the House. And, there's a whole lot of things that it seems like we have the answers on, but, need to be exposed in the public forum. And Democrats can continue to do that in the House. And I think that the caliber of Dems that are running both on the House side and the Senate side is exactly why, the Republicans will not take back the House, but we have an opportunity to increase the majority and hopefully take back the Senate, which is equally as important as winning the presidency.
Adam Pargamenko, great to finally talk to you. Look forward to sitting down and have a longer conversation. Subscribe now. You'll thank me later to Big Stuff. Go to bigstuff.us. Follow Adam on Twitter, where he is awesome. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Oh, my God. It's Andy Kindler. Huge.
Don't say anything about all my slams about Adam Sandler.
No, not at all, Kindler. I am so excited to have you on my Impeachment Extravaganza Bonanza. I love following you on Twitter. You're a very political guy. You watched Impeachment, sir? You sat and you watched it?
Well, since I'm a seldom or quasi-employed comedian, I do have the opportunity to clear out the schedule. So I did listen to every minute of it, but I did fast forward through the evil Philbin.
Oh, the lawyer Philbin.
Yes. And he's not related to Jerry Philbin. Anybody?
No.
Those New York Jets reference.
Oh, I should have gotten it then. Why did you fast forward through Philbin?
I watched the obligatory amounts of it, but I just feel like the level, I guess the thing that's bothered me is the level of evil. It used to be in the old days that the GOP they had a better shtick, that they weren't evil. But now it's like, it literally is every single one of those Republican GOP people are in, they're in cahoots. I'd put them in jail if I could do that.
Okay, so let's talk about them. The Republican senators, you pay close attention, and is there anybody specifically that gets your ire up? Are you a Mitch McConnell guy? Are you a Lamar Alexander? What about this Susan Collins, Kindler?
Well, I think everybody universally has a problem with Susan Collins. So once you watch anything past the Kavanaugh hearing,
yes,
I don't know what I was expecting. I know she voted once good on the healthcare thing, right? When McCain went down with the thumb, she helped with that vote.
Yes.
Yeah. But I think the Lamar Alexander is the worst because I'm very old and I've been around. I've known this guy. This guy has been pitched as a GOP swing vote or moderate. I can't think of one example of him being moderate. I do remember in the old days, he seemed like he was going to be moderate, but he's worse. He's worse than someone like Cruz. Because and then they say, well, he's friends with McConnell. How can you be friends with McConnell? McConnell. So it's like, there's no hope on that side of the aisle.
Much has changed in our lifetime with the Republican Party, but the bottom line is they all seem to pay loyalty to President Trump. Why do you think that is?
I think it's become well, on one level, I do think I've been fooled in the sense that this is the party they were going to be. This is where they were going, and Trump's just the guy they landed on. So, in a way, I hate to say it, but I don't really. I've been calling Trump a Nazi from the beginning, and and I'm also Jewish and a Nazi expert. And if you read back in the 30s, they made fun of Hitler. They thought he was a joke. And in fact, the people who were, quote, moderates thought, well, we'll let Hitler do a little bit and we'll appease him. And I know you're a big Neville Chamberlain fan, but you can't appease.
Yeah, I have a full cardboard cutout of Chamberlain right here in my studio.
I told you it's Wilt Chamberlain.
Oh,
it's Wilt Chamberlain.
I get them confused. Am I the only one? Andy
Just
Kindler.
sexually.
I have to ask you what you think about what this means for the presidential election, the impeachment. Do you think it hurts Trump and Republicans and helps Democrats? Or does it hurt Democrats and nobody's going to give a shit about it come November?
Well, after the last election, I said to myself, I am never going to be confident about anything again because you don't know if it's stolen,
right.
You don't know what's going to happen,
right.
And the Comey thing, but. I just can't believe that. I do think that he's going to go down if everyone gets out and votes, but I still am deathly scared of the Senate.
Right. Yeah, everybody is, including mostly women's bodies and black people.
Yeah, that's
and
why
immigrants.
I'll always kind of despise Ralph Nader because he wasn't a poor white person who ever had to get an abortion in the South.
Right.
And he absolutely, this is no joke. He sold it that there is zero differences between the two parties. And I always felt he hated Gore more than he hated Bush for some reason, which I'm not sure why.
Well, we could talk about Jill Stein. We could talk about. I don't want to though. All right. So, are you? Where are you? Are you the optimist and thought? Well, maybe there'll be a Republican that's going to vote for evidence and witnesses, or are you constantly the pessimist? Since the election, Donald Trump gets away with everything, and he'll get away with this too. Where is Andy Kindler's spectrum?
I'm kind of like. I understand the Kenan Thompson point of view. You've heard him. Constantly,
nothing matters.
Yeah, and he keeps going. He's going to get reelected. He's going to get reelected. But I like a foolish. I think like a not naively foolish, but these people are eventually going to do the right thing. I really did think that maybe there was somebody on that side of the aisle, but there's none. There's nobody.
Anybody? Speaking of anybody, is there anybody in your circles in entertainment and comedy in California that's a big time Trump supporter that you enjoy sparring with, talking to, or are they all insane?
Well, I mean, it was James Woods for a while. He's crazy. I like to fight with Dershowitz, but nobody I can't think of anybody in California. Dershowitz is my favorite, but he's not in California. But
you talked to Dershowitz?
No, I talked to him on Twitter.
Oh, really? He responds to you?
The early days when he first came out, not the early days, but like about a couple of years ago when he was still arguing, because his argument, I'm completely impartial. I'm completely, he is really pours it on with lies. He prefaces everything with lies. But I don't think so. I think the people who are right-wing, aren't they all known and they kind of hide now?
That's my impression. I can't find them.
Hollywood. Yes. Hollywood people.
Yeah, because they're worried they're going to get canceled.
Yeah.
Everybody's getting canceled. They want to get canceled if I come out and say horrible things. All right, Andy, what a pleasure. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you so much.
To his podcast, Thought Spiral. Follow him on Twitter at Andy Kindler, AndyKindler.com, one of the greatest comedians of our generation. What an honor to get you on the Extravaganza. Thank you, Andy.
Thank you.
And finally, a parody of President Trump, who has been impeached. Played by comedian J.L. Covan, the following conversation is deeply offensive and yet very believable that a president would say these things. However, none of the previous guests on today's episode have heard this and have no affiliation with it, and you can blame comedian J.L. Covan, who was hilarious and deeply offensive as the president. Listen to his podcast, Trump Pod, Making Podcasts Great Again, and his other podcast, Righteous Prick. All right, let's go to the president right now.
Melania, it's called the Blumpkin, okay? You got to learn what it is, okay, if you want to stick around. Who is this?
God.
Is this
Hi,
well,
Mr.
you know, I tried to cover up the receiver. Is this podcast Pete?
Yes, Mr. President, thank you. It's me, Pete Dominic. Thank you for taking the call tonight.
Well, you know, we're in the halftime. My great ad where I freed an N-word from jail is now running, so we're feeling very good. We're very positive. We're helping the blacks. We're doing all that. So great night for America. So what can I, total exoneration, by the way.
Yeah, listen, I got to ask you a couple tough questions, Mr. President. First of all, it's clear that you did interfere with Ukraine to try to damage the reputation of your opponent, the former Vice President, Joe Biden. You've as much as admitted it. There's a tremendous amount of evidence. Will you at least tell me that that's exactly what your efforts were, sir?
First of all, it was a perfect call. It's what they call a perfect call.
Right.
They wanted to give aid to Ukraine. That's what Joe Biden wanted to do.
No.
He wanted to give AIDS, and I said, no AIDS. We don't want...
Sir, they wanted to give aid. That is a horrific thing to even insinuate.
Well, you know what? Maybe Hunter Biden might, if we're being totally honest, he's a pretty sleazy guy. He might actually have AIDS, but we're not here to talk about that. The fact of the matter is, we didn't want to give Ukraine an ally AIDS. We wanted an investigation into corruption. I'm, as you know, a tremendous corruption fighter. And we've been totally acquitted. Totally perfect call. Unbelievably perfect call, I think.
Well, you were actually impeached, and you will always be impeached by the House of Representatives, sir. You were acquitted by the United States Senate, but experts, legal analysts saying that it wasn't really a trial because, of course, you would not allow for evidence or witnesses. Why could we not talk to John Bolton and Mick Mulvaney and others if you have done nothing wrong?
It's called exclusive residential privilege. It's a very deep, I know you're not a constitutional scholar, so you wouldn't understand, but it's a very intense, strong, very strong privilege that you get when you are a great president. So very special privilege is also what they call it.
I think it's
so they can't talk to these people.
Called obstruction of Congress.
They can talk to Mike. Well, it's called an acquittal, actually. They can talk to Michael Bolton if they want. John Bolton, not going to get him.
Okay.
And we've been totally exonerated, total acquittal. They're now 0 for 2.
No.
So we're feeling so good. Before the Super Bowl, I actually called Xi, my good friend Xi over in China.
Yes.
And he did me a great favor.
What's that?
Said, I need you to kill Elizabeth Warren's golden retriever.
Oh my God!
And you know how we had the Khashoggi? Well, this is the Khadoggi because that dog in China, the way the Native Americans, I call them the red men, way they use all the buffalo. You ever heard that? How they use all the parts of the buffalo? In China, they use all the parts of the golden retriever. So great to be exonerated, and we can have a lot of countries looking into a lot of corruption.
I don't even know.
The golden retriever. The golden retriever was not a good guy.
Okay, I don't even know if I can share this with my audience because you have literally been racist, you have been sexist, you have been anti-Indian, anti-Asian. You've played out almost every.
I love Modi.
Anti-LGBT.
Excuse me, that's fake news. I love Modi. In India, we love Indians. We love those Indians.
No, I was talking about Native Americans.
Then you're using the improper term. You're not PC because we love the tech stuff, cab driving,
right? Here
smelly
we go.
Food Indians. They are great people.
And there it is.
But
it's
these casino monsters. It's these guys ripping us off at casinos. Okay, with the teepees and the alcohol.
All right, I have heard enough, sir, from you. Thank you. I have got to go. I appreciate your time.
Tremendous exoneration.
No,
tremendous exoneration.
I don't think
Total
so.
acquittal.
You are a monster.
I've got to call some other foreign countries right now and get them to look into Buttigieg. You ever hear that? His name's Buttigieg.
Yes. Okay. Thank you. Maybe
the Greeks know something about it.
All right, there it is. Thank you. Goodbye, sir. Good God. Monster. I went from 9:30 in the morning to 9 p.m. at night with the interviews, putting them all together. Hope you enjoyed it and got a lot of different points of view. I did reach out to a couple of Trump supporters. I could not get them on. I apologize. I didn't have that point of view on today's Impeachment Extravaganza Bonanza. I'm Pete Dominick. This podcast is sustained entirely on Patreon. Patreon.com/Pete Dominick. Subscribe, give a rating, and keep listening to old episodes and tell people about new episodes. The next of which will be Wednesday. Every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, new episodes of Stand Up with the best experts and smart people I can find. Talk to you then.